Hello, everyone. This is the very first episode of the Jack and Jill show, which has been restarted from another project that we had, but we decided to change gears a little bit.
I'm Jill.
And I'm Jack, and those are fake names. But what we're doing is we're going to have a show that where we discuss different objects or different subjects that we find interesting.
Yep. We're going to talk about some questions that are open-ended questions. There's no right answer, even though Jack here might lead you to believe.
Actually, let's start with, because you made a list, because we had a similar show before, and then we kind of abandoned it, and we're restarting it right now. So Jill made a list of all the topics she wants to talk about, and it basically overlaps almost entirely with topics that I want to talk about. So we'll just read it to you right now.
Oh, Jack, you're putting me on the spot. Let me see.
Well, you already have the list. It's right there.
Ah, there it is. So I'll read you some of the questions that I have, or all 11 questions that I have. The first one is...
So just to introduce it, this is the kind of topics that we would want to discuss on the show and eventually hopefully have guests doing appearances. Go ahead.
All right. The first question I have is, what makes a good person? Second question I have, how will the world look like in 500 years? Third, what makes a good parent? Fourth, how can we live peacefully in a Star Trek-like world that's mixed race? 5, what are some technologies you're looking forward to in the next decade? Decade?
In the next
Excuse
decade.
me. 6, what will the world look like if we legalized prostitution and drugs? 7, how would you solve overpopulation? 8, how can we improve public discussions in the age of biased media and social media? Is social media the new propaganda distributor? 9, is the U.S. close to revolution? Why or why not? 10, what is the number one thing the U.S. can do to improve its society? 11, can you love your loved ones the same if they were in a different body sleeve? And does beauty really make you more lovable?
Oh, those are excellent. I think we're going to get to a lot of those in the next couple of months. But those are the kind of questions that we generally find interesting. And we'll touch more upon them. I particularly find interesting to see how the world, or try to imagine how the world will look like in 500 years.
That question was really inspired by the Dune series. I'm just mesmerized at how the what was the author of that?
Frank Herbert, yeah.
Herbert, yeah, author was particularly skilled at imagining the world through a span of thousands of years.
Yeah, well, his world, admittedly, was kind of static, which is, it's strange to say, but it was it was a very dynamic world, and a lot of things happened. But at the same time, not as much as you would expect. It's almost like the 3,000 years weren't like human evolution, because you know how much the world has changed in the last 50 years, right?
Sure.
Well, I mean, in terms of technology.
I'm thinking about, some things have changed and some things have not. I mean, the way you cook food has not changed.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That makes sense, actually. Never mind. I'm wrong.
The way you transport yourself has not changed per se. Certain transportation methods have become more widely available and affordable, but, people still transport themselves in cars and airplanes.
Yeah, that's true. And like I
trains.
said, I think it's kind of interesting because maybe it actually predicts that we have hit a plateau of some kind in terms of technology evolution. And maybe we kind of have, because like most of the advancements that are happening right now are in the computer industry. But outside of that, I guess biology is advancing quite a bit. And then in that book, they did have quite sophisticated biology.
Well, our understanding of biology is becoming clearer,
Yeah.
and we can potentially go a lot further. There are a lot of open-ended questions out there, in biology that have no answers yet.
Well, in the next 500 years, I think that's definitely going to happen. But anyways, we're not talking about that right now. We can have a whole episode on
and
that.
that would definitely lead to the question: should we be immortal? Should we be amortal, rather? you know.
Well, immortal or amoral, because you can achieve both. Maybe
And
you
can
can.
you even achieve that in this human body with my arthritic joints? But I don't think, we'll live to 200 years if that's my goal.
Well, but maybe they can be renewed. Like if you realign every cell in your body, you renew your cells in your body every 7 years, pretty much. You renew, like, basically every 7 years, every cell in your body has died and has become, has or divided, right? So as a result, there is no cell in your body after 7 years that really survives, except some of your neuron cells, because
Mm-hmm.
those last you a
Mm-hmm.
lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So the interesting question there is, well, couldn't you just realign yourself over a period of a few years where, all the bad bits of you are taken out and then all the good bits are just basically regrown inside your own body?
Mm. That'd be nice.
I mean, I
That
think
would
that,
certainly address that whole issue. If you're going to live 500 years, for example, are you going to live 500 years in an old body or are you going to live in a new body, like of a 20 or a 30 something year old?
well, and there's certain parts of that equation that are mostly mechanical. So things like wrinkles and things like that, they form and also mechanical damage in your bones. Those things form because of just repeated stress in the tissue, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, when you're young, you just renew your skin cells a lot faster.
Right.
And then as you get older, you renew your cells a lot slower, and as a result, you start developing these kinds of problems and these wrinkles, right? So your skin is basically like when you're younger, it just renews more often. That's why you heal faster too. And this is the one fucking thing about. By the way, both of us are in mid-30s,
Yeah.
and when you were younger, like things would heal faster. Like you would cut yourself, and it would just heal a lot faster. Like, if you're working on cars and such, not because you're cutting yourself. But the point is that when I would cut myself, when I would be working on cars, even with like rusty screws and crap, it would heal within a few days. Whereas now it takes me like a week or a week and a half to heal the same kind of wound. And that's because my skin is literally just not renewing as fast. It's not
Oh.
dividing as fast.
Yeah. This is why women put retin A on their skin to help them do cell turnover faster and have shinier and prettier skin.
Well, but the reason why you slow down with your cell turnover is because high turnover can lead to cancer. So this is the kind of it's a kind of balancing act that nature is doing, where earlier on it's more important not to get eaten and to mature to adulthood than it is to not die from cancer. Right? So earlier on, your evolutionary biology kind of makes you more basically powerful. It's kind of like, because you have to remember.
So what you're saying is that if adults had equal cell turnover as young people or children, we would be full of tumors? Is that what you're saying?
Essentially, yes, but it's important to understand it in context. So, for instance,
But I guess statistically, you would have a higher chance of some cells going awry.
well, much, much higher,
Yeah.
right? Why? Why is that, though?
Because you're turning over way more cells.
Way more cells, but also you're doing it for a much, 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 much longer period of time, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're in your adolescence and in your like childhood, you are for, well, let's say the first, you really solidly stop growing at 25, right? But you really get rid of some of those like superpowers of renewing your cells and stuff so quickly by the time you're about 20, right? So you spend the first 20 years in that super high turnover speed, right? And then you spend the next 60 years, maybe if you live to the age of 80, right? The next 60 years you spend with much slower rate, right? If you kept up that same high rate of cell turnover for the next 60 years, then eventually you will result in DNA damage. And
This really makes me wonder if women who use retin A have a higher incidence of skin cancer.
I think that would be the result, in fact.
Yeah.
Because you only get so many. So it's kind of interesting. In your body, you have the stem cells, right? And then you have the regular somal cells, like your skin cells, whatever, right? And your skin cells, they have those telomeres, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing that not Eric, what's the Brett Weinstein? That's his big claim to fame. That he claims that is like the cancer clock. It basically stops these cells from running away, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the telomeres inside the individual cells, in their DNA, telomeres are the ends of the chromosomes, right?
Right.
And every time the cell divides, they kind of get chopped off, kind
Mm-hmm.
of trimmed a little bit, because
Mm-hmm.
basically the proteins make it to the end of the chromosome, and then they like split off too early, right? Because it's already to the end. Maybe it's like more difficult to do the end or whatever, right? These are all like molecular machinery that's doing this on that level, and and what's happening is that every time the cell divides, that those telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter, and eventually they get so short that the cell can no longer divide, and then that entire line of cells dies off. And when that line of cells dies off, you go to the original stem cell, which is usually located not too far away, and that stem cell that might be sitting there for like a very long time, like many, many decades, right? It now divides and creates another copy of itself, and then that copy starts to create your somal cells and divide constantly. And then the second, so the stem cell divides and creates stem cell A and stem cell B. Stem cell B becomes the new cell lineage. And stem cell A stays in place and doesn't divide anymore and just sits there, basically preserving a clean copy of the DNA, right? But eventually, you just run out. That original stem cell gets divided so many times that there's so much DNA damage, and you start literally losing cells. Like your cell count goes down, and you can't reproduce your colony anymore.
Is there a particular period in a human's biology in which this damage is more rapid than in others? Like, for example, like maybe in middle age when you're super stressed out.
Well, the more stressed out you are, the more your cells divide, I suppose. That's not true actually.
Or in your 60s or 70s.
Stress causes a lot of inflammation.
When do the roosters come home to roost? When does this process get accelerated or
it doesn't.
decelerated?
It doesn't. It's more like the best analogy is that photocopy analogy, but another analogy that you can think of is
it's just the passage of time.
It depends, first of all, how big your tank is, so to speak. You know, like genetically speaking, some people live longer and some people die sooner. It's because genetically speaking, maybe it's epigenetically, we don't really know, but those people get like more or less cells reserved for stem cells. Basically, they get more or less cells ready to go and create a new lineage, and as a result, they live longer or shorter. Right. So for every person, it's a little bit different based on their like genetic makeup and epigenetic makeup, and also how much damage they sustain from other reasons, like for instance, growing up in a third world country, or having bad food, or being obese, or with all the inflammation that comes with that. That all takes a toll, right, on you. So somebody who's very obese can be taking years off of their life, just like somebody who is, for instance, smoking, but in different ways.
Well, there we go, Jack. Our first tangent. Let's bring it back and continue introducing ourselves.
Okay, so we already mentioned that we're in our 30s, have advanced degrees in various subjects. And I'm actually reading from a list here. We don't want to be too specific.
We do freelance tech and consulting.
Yeah, we do a lot of coding and consulting for early stage tech companies, and in our real environment. And we live off grid somewhere in the middle of California.
Yes, we've been living off grid for 6 years now.
6, 8, I don't know.
Something like this. It's not one of those situations in which we are growing our food and like completely homesteading, but it is a situation in which we have water and electricity because we're all solar.
Like basically we're complete. Like there's nothing connected to our house,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The joke that we make is if you scoop up like a house and fly away with it, if you're like an alien, and you scoop up and fly away with our house and a piece of dirt that it stands on, then we probably wouldn't even notice until the next morning, when we walk out.
Probably, yeah.
But even though this house is not built all that great, so yeah, maybe it would fall apart from the vibration. But in any case,
But our lifestyle has really not changed that much since the COVID-19 epidemic started, minus the fact that we can't travel.
yeah, and but on the other hand, it gave us time to work on our van and to work on our projects.
Oh, did we tell you guys we are converting a van because we are those people?
Yes, and we're doing a van conversion, and we're gonna have a van, and we're gonna travel through United States to understand life. And the reason we live off Great Elf is because we decided to come here and to figure out what's next that we wanted to do with our life, and we have yet to do so.
You know, guys, finding clarity with what you want to do with your life is one of life's greatest challenges. Some people are born knowing what they want to do, and some people don't know to
Some people have so many options and have no idea what the fuck they want to do.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's okay. We're still enjoying this time as well. Life is an adventure, and you only live it once, and then you get to live all kinds of other lives.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we can
sure.
talk about that. We
Oh,
never talked about my DMT religion that I'm peddling now to people.
I was gonna say one more thing about that, finding your purpose in life.
Mm-hmm.
I really love that quote, or at least from that Circle movie, when she was the girl that started working at the Google like.
Oh yes. The Circle is a movie that came out 2016, I think, something like that. About a girl who gets a job at the Circle, which is like a Google-like company, basically,
like
a social media company.
But there's an interview scene, and the last question the interviewer asks the girl is, "What are you most afraid of?" And she has the perfect response. Okay, maybe that's not the right question.
Well, what was her response?
An unfulfilled life. And I was like, she nailed it. I think personally, my greatest fear is living in an unfulfilled life.
But if I remember the movie correctly itself, the way she was defining the unfulfilled life was quite fucked up. Like it wasn't the real fulfillment that she was after. She kind of became brainwashed by the Circle, I thought.
She did, but I'm not talking about the movie. I'm
Okay.
talking about that specific instance.
So not what she meant, but
Not
just what
before
she said.
Yeah, not before she transformed into this sheepish cult follower.
I think she became a cult leader
Or
at
leader.
the end of the movie.
Yeah. Or leader, yeah.
Maybe that's how you become a cult leader. You become the follower, and then you take it off. That's an easier way to build a cult. We always talk about how do you build a cult. And
You infiltrate another cult?
you infiltrate another cult and take it over from the inside. That's like way easier. You just have to pick the good cult.
Yes.
Oh, but that kind of sucks because that makes me think that maybe that's one of the downsides of having a cult. People will try to take over your cult.
Yeah. That's true. Because those people are already pretty gullible. Or pretty, they're passionate about something and
You don't even have to take over the cult. Think about it. This is perfect. This is a genius idea. The best way to look for people to join your cult, or the best place to look for people to join your cult, is inside another cult, because they're already susceptible to cult-like behavior.
Yeah.
All you have to do is just transplant them to your... You don't even have to take over that cult. You can be like, hey, come over to my better cult over there.
Yeah.
Oh,
You know what's funny? Now that we're sitting and recording this podcast, I realize how nervous I am just talking to people who I can't even see. I'm a really.
But
I'm
you're
a,
not
a
talking. You're
real,
talking. You're talking to
I'm
me,
I'm
and
a
as
real introvert, and
people are.
people are scary.
Yes. Nobody's gonna even listen to this. There's
Yeah.
gonna be like 5 people who are gonna listen to this podcast. Because we still don't know how to promote it. If you know how to promote podcasts, feel free to. I don't know. Let us know somehow.
Okay.
Oh, by the way you can find out more about us, which was part of our introduction.
You know how I've discovered podcasts? I've just. I'm sorry. I had to cut in.
Okay.
I just searched for a specific topic, say metformin, and that's how I discovered Peter Attia, the
Okay.
podcast. The mustards I discovered through YouTube. They were doing a lot of short YouTube videos at the
Mhm.
time about just like random media, and I thought they were entertaining with their information, and then I was like, oh, maybe they have a podcast, and they had just started a podcast, and now I listen to their podcasts and not watch their YouTube videos because they're not very good looking people. And I
Did
want my
I
entertainers
thought
to
they
be good
stopped.
looking.
I thought they stopped making their YouTube videos.
No, they still make YouTube videos.
Anyways, I was telling people how they can find out more about us as opposed to other people.
But I was just telling you 2 channels people use to find people. Podcasts.
I know this
Okay.
is something we'll. Okay, well then you introduce how people can find us.
No, go ahead. Sorry. People can find us on our website, jackjillshow.com. And
And that's it because well we haven't set up anything else, but people can find us at jackjillshow.com.
eventually YouTube.
And YouTube, which is probably where you might be watching this or
Listening
to this. And
and we'll get a Facebook group going sometime.
yeah, and we'll get the Facebook group going.
So you can share with us your thoughts and topics that you would like us to discuss.
You know what? I kind of would like it if Facebook went in the direction of actually allowing you to create communities where they don't have their standards apply, and like you can just create your own communities, but
I
use
see.
the credentials from
Oh.
Facebook.
Soon you'll be able to find us on Discord. Cloudflare is down today.
Oh yes, and Discord is down as a
And
result.
Discord is down.
So, anyways, so that's about it. We'll create more social media accounts as
Or
we
channels that you can
go.
discover us on.
And I think that's all on our list. We want to talk about things that we were interested in. So I think we kind of covered that with the list of questions we want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly I'm interested in basically anything that has to do with technology, how things are constructed, how things are built. I'm very much interested in basically anything that we can do to bring manufacturing back to the United States, things like that, because we work kind of related in that industry. Of the few remaining manufacturers here in the United States are one of our customers. And
I like history.
yeah,
I think studying history is a good starting point to kind of making sense of the present and the political.
well, it's like what Ray Dalio says. Dalio, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but anyways, that's what he says about how even though something might be happening for the first time in his lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
it may have happened many, many, many times in lifetimes past,
Mm-hmm.
in the past of the world. And
But it's just not in the collective memory of the people that are alive right now.
exactly, because the collective memory of the people that are alive right now is barely a generation, maybe
Yeah.
2 generations.
Yeah.
Like, let's see, 2 generations would be going back to like my grandparents, right? Like, or is it great grandparents?
Great grandparents.
Great-
Probably.
So parents is the first generation, grandparents is the second generation. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Okay, so no, that makes sense. So it would be great grandparents
Yeah.
who their collective, like the collective truth of that generation, it has nothing to do with reality today,
Right.
right? And like that's by all accounts that will be people what in their like hundreds Like, it doesn't mean that those people don't understand what's going on in reality, but their collective truth, if you take them as a people's, doesn't match at all ours.
Right, right, right. Oh, there was one more thing we forgot to bring up. Our backgrounds are a bit mixed. Jack has a Soviet background, and that has colored his perspective in a lot of the issues that we discuss personally.
I see.
between
So
us.
basically, now I'm a Soviet stereotype.
Yeah, you're like Chekhov. I'm sorry. I'm just kidding.
I see.
It certainly colors some of your perspectives. The way you want to treat society as a collective, you know, and you want to. I feel like you have a lot of communist tendencies.
Oh, I see. Now I'm a communist and a Soviet. I see.
It's not in a bad way. You really do care for the people. You wish to have the best outcome, you know. And I come from, very. Also an immigrant. Actually, Jack is an immigrant, right? You came to this country
Yes.
when you were like 12 or something, and I came to this country when I was like 6 or 7. From a developing nation in Latin America, and I don't know. I always imagined that Jack's family was sitting like around 1920 having fancy tea, and my family were out in the bush trying to find some wild boar to eat for dinner.
Yes. Well,
You know.
my people were very fancy. Oh, yes. And your people were not so fancy.
Yeah. So this is like
But then my people had a revolution about our fanciness.
yeah. Well, actually, earlier than 1920.
Or as a result of too much fanciness.
Yeah, earlier than 1920. And so I'm not an intellectual, but I am curious about, the world.
Well, you can be an intellectual just by being curious. It's not a genetic trait.
Well, when I think of intellectuals, I think of Weinstein and his entire slew of relatives and their wives and their.
Well, first of all, one of them is kind of a charlatan, and we know that. That's actually something I'm going to discuss yet again on this podcast. I did it in the previous one. But again, just because.
Well, I'm just saying, this is like, but, we're both like kind of like middle class Americans, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, with like a little bit of flavor, with a little bit of spice. you know?
Okay.
So that's it. Because I feel like people's backgrounds definitely influences their thoughts about things. Like
No, of course it
and their
does, but
and their
why does it
values,
matter?
And their values, because it will color their values. Like if you are fighting for, America, America's like your right to freedom of speech, and I'm fighting for my right to have a lawn that looks as awesome as my neighbors, or to live in a gated community with cookie cutter houses, we might run into problems. Or
No, that makes no sense.
I guess what I'm saying is that Jack and myself have sometimes different opinions about things.
Oh, yeah.
Because of where we come from sometimes.
Yeah. Like, I have correct opinions, and then there are other opinions.
And also, Jack is a guy and I'm a girl, and sometimes I have feminist tendencies. Almost like social justice warrior tendencies, but I try to keep them, on the down low.
And yet, I'm the communist. Okay.
Anyways.
I see how that all works.
But only because I really feel like we should help people who are in worse off position than ourselves. But sometimes I feel like, being kind and being, trying to help sometimes makes things worse.
Well, it makes things worse if you do it for the wrong reasons and in the wrong ways.
Yeah, well, it
So.
often ends up happening in the wrong way.
Well, it often ends up happening in the wrong way also because, and this might be an interesting aside, is because people who are doing the changes, who are doing the something different, are doing so for the wrong reasons. Like, for instance, what's going on right now with all the protests against the police, and then all these movements to defund the police, right? And there's the right reason for doing that, and defunding the police would not be the answer. If you're doing it for the right reason, what you would examine is, why is the police in America so violent? Why is police in America, generally speaking, more violent than most other modern countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why do we have?
Well, people could come up with many different answers. Like people in the UK could say, well, it's because they have guns.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that kind of violence. We're just talking about casual violence where a lot of cops are just don't see the people who they're patrolling, or the people who they're, I don't know, protecting, as really on the same level as they are. They constantly demand respect from everybody, first of all. And you should not respect police more so than you would respect any other human being who just happens to be doing their important job, right? But the point is that at the same time, people should respect the police to the extent that they're human beings, and they shouldn't be treated any worse than anybody else who's doing a decent job, if they're doing a decent job.
Oh, on a side note about respect, I feel or think that respect is an easy way to get people of average intelligence to keep the system flowing and in order.
So, I mean, I get that, and maybe this is why police want respect, but I don't know. I just think that a lot of the police officers out there, not like majority, but like 30% at least, 20 to 30%, are basically kind of assholes, and we are not, we're not removing the assholes out of the force, even though, and this is an interesting fact to also keep in mind, that if you look at internal police investigations, where the police officers are investigating, other police officers for misconduct,
Right.
most of those complaints are filed by other police officers anonymously. So interestingly enough, even though a lot of the times the narrative is that, yes, there is few bad apples, so to speak, the analogy, in the departments, it's the fault of the police officers. It's the fault of the individual patrolmen, who are the good guys, for not reporting the shitty behavior of their, co-workers. But that's not the case. In fact, that's kind of the opposite is the case, where majority of the complaints that against other police officers, anonymous complaints, are actually filed by other police officers in the departments. The problem is that most of those are closed without any kind of action, because the people at the top, the heads of the department, have an incentive to, of course, keep the department as tidy as possible, not have any kind of,
Conflicts.
bad conflicts or bad, not conflicts, but bad things going on,
Yeah.
right? So if you have an officer, for instance, who used excessive force by maybe hitting somebody that they shouldn't be hitting, and that somebody else who was on the scene saw it and reported it, as a department head, it's in your interest to basically figure out how to sweep it under the rug and just make sure that it doesn't happen, because that's a bad, like, if you have people using excessive force on your in your department, that's kind of like your fault, and as a result, you, as a department head, you would be,
Oh, yeah.
I want to make sure that this doesn't come
You
to.
can definitely see this in that TV series on Amazon Prime, Harry Bosch,
Oh yeah,
and how that the police department in that TV show
yes.
deals with the misbehavior of the police officers and detectives.
Yeah. And I have worked with a lot of police officers and the legal system in the past, so I kind of know what I'm talking about here, at least when it comes to Southern California area.
Is there anything else you wanted to share, Jack?
Well, no, we were talking about other things that we were interested in. I think we covered it.
Okay.
And you were talking about history and how history is
yeah.
a fascinating way to see what might happen in the future, for it has happened in the past many times before.
Right, yeah.
Like Ray Dalio, for instance, right now is predicting that we're going to go through this transition where America's power fades, and the power of the Chinese goes up.
Right.
So we kind of switching places, and he points out how this kind of he calls it the New World Order shift, I
Mhm.
guess, right?
Mhm.
Or the
That's
or,
what he calls it.
yeah.
He
So he
refers to it as a new world order.
and he just says that that happens every like 80 to 100 years or so. There's this big shift between different powers.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's not a massive shift because, for instance, one took place in 1945-ish. I guess he times it around there.
Mhm.
More like 39, really. Um, After World War II, when England became no longer the empire on which the sun never sets. What was that quote?
Oh, the sun never sets on the British Empire.
Yeah. So Britain or England became no longer the largest empire, and in fact succeeded that crown to United States, who became the largest empire in the world, as a matter of fact, at that point, right? With the most nuclear weapons, with the largest army, largest military, largest ability, basically presence on every continent in the world.
Sort of. I did some traveling in the mid 2000s, probably, prior to the social media age. And at that time, I thought that no matter where I went, whether it was east or west, it was all British. Like all those countries I went to see were all former British colonies or were influenced by the British
Yeah,
in
but
some way or
but
another.
exactly because um, that happened. That kind of ended 50 years ago or 60 years ago at that point, right? But of course, the influence on their architecture, the influence on their culture will propagate throughout centuries. Just like, for instance, our influence, just like, for instance, even the Arabic. Think about the Arabic Empire, and we're using the Arabic numerals for
Right.
for
Yeah.
things, and
Yeah.
things like that. Especially if they're positive things, they propagate throughout your culture, right?
Mhm.
People don't usually get rid of like positive influences. In Britain, on a whole, even though people will be like, "Oh my God, they're colonialists," but on a whole, we're a positive influence on the places that they, you know,
Came into
came in
or
contact with,
ruled for some time.
ruled. I mean, look at Hong Kong. Like right now, we're all think that it's a tragedy that China took over Hong Kong, but Hong Kong was under British rule, and they thought it was better than being under the Chinese rule, for instance.
Well, right now,
Right now, yeah.
because they had more freedom,
Yeah.
because we in the West believe it's okay to express your
But that's the thing.
opinion.
So yeah, the British of the colonial era were like racist assholes. Like pretty much everybody back then was a racist asshole, right? But they brought, and now obviously not all of them, many of them were quite nice, decent people, because by its very nature, society is usually divided 50-50 into liberals and conservatives, and there's conservative and liberal assholes, obviously, but, um, the, um, the British Empire, for all of its faults, though, was a really great influence on many of these countries. They constructed railroads. They got these countries modernized. The problem was that it was a forceful colonization,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to a colonization where,
By the way, it was always a colonization in search of resources.
yeah, it's always in search of it. Today we were reading an article about World War II, and it's funny how much of World War II was really just looking for resources, like natural
Fought
resources.
for oil and earlier.
Oil, coal, like rare earth minerals.
Right.
Um,
Because it was the beginning of the oil, the transportation for
hmm
oil for transportation and heating. Did they
Yeah,
use
heating.
heating?
Heating was huge.
And minerals for airplanes and cars, right?
Yeah, yeah. Cars, airplanes, consumer goods. Remember this was already electrical period, so you needed things like tungsten. You needed things like copper. You needed all these ores, and
Right.
they're not available everywhere.
Hey, what do you think we're doing right now? What kind of minerals and raw resources are we kind of scavenging from the third world that the dictators are willing to sell to us? Because it seems like it was in the 20th century. It was all about energy, and the 1400s through the 1600s, it was all about gold, and
So basically, you're
silver.
saying what's like the next,
What's the next
oil
gold?
rush? Like
Yeah,
it was gold rush, then it was an oil rush. Uh, probably cobalt. I mean, we're
in
kind of doing that right
Africa and
now.
Australia
Africa and
and
Australia.
Canada.
Yeah, probably cobalt. Cobalt is used in all the lithium batteries, but as a mineral,
But you said that cobalt was not as important as magnesium. Was it
no, no,
magnesium
no.
or
So
lith?
in lithium batteries, cobalt is actually more important than lithium itself
Oh, I
because
see.
you need
Right,
more
right,
cobalt, and
right,
cobalt is
right.
actually more difficult. Basically, it's more difficult to derive enough cobalt for a battery than it is to derive enough lithium because lithium is quite available and
And the story of cobalt is very, very saddening. It's often found in war-torn countries in Africa, and it uses slave labor, like children's slave labor,
child slave labor, which is
slave labor that's sold
the
to the
slaviest of
Chinese
labors.
to Chinese companies and the Chinese companies then sell to the American companies.
Yeah. So and a lot of this cobalt is supposed to be, like Apple and places like that pride themselves on the fact that they are, their batteries are cobalt like
Free,
conflict mineral free and
yeah.
stuff like that. But realistically speaking, what they're doing is they're buying from reputable suppliers in China. But reputable suppliers in China and even in America have been known to sell by accident, with no knowledge on their own, all kinds of
Conflict,
conflict minerals.
yeah.
And that's because it's really hard to track that shit. Somebody, gets some fake paperwork done in one of these countries. How are you going to check if it was really like, I mean, it is tracked, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't slip through a lot.
Right. Right. And one of the other things is that, if you're really pretentious about driving your fancy Tesla or electric car, you should think about it again because,
It may have been built with child labor.
yeah.
Oh, I mean, people can drive those Tesla cars if they want to, and it's a little bit too, let me put it this way, it's a little bit too early to feel superior yet because most of the electricity for those cars is still generated through coal. And even if you say, well, in my area, it's not, well, yeah, but take America as a whole, we all share the same electricity, like the grids
Yeah,
share
but America
electricity.
is mostly run on natural gas nowadays.
Natural gas and coal. And natural gas is much better than coal.
I believe that the only coal plants left were in Arizona and I think maybe
Well, they
Nevada.
had a few coal plants left, especially
I did some of this research, and most of them were,
even in the Midwest
yeah, even in the Midwest. They
and
were,
the East Coast.
yeah,
They all converted to natural gas.
yeah, because it was cheaper.
Oh, okay.
And this is why, the coal people in the East Coast and the Midwest were begging Trump
So what are they mining coal for then?
I'm not sure.
No, because we're still like I haven't heard any of the large companies.
Maybe then I'm misunderstood, but I was pretty sure that all the East Coast and
Maybe
the
they're selling them to
Midwest.
China.
Maybe.
China certainly burns a shit ton of coal, but I think they have a shit ton of coal too.
And they were really upset because those jobs were so high paying. Also, they were like $100,000 a year or something, and
The coal mining
yeah,
job.
the coal mining
Yeah.
jobs, and you know, you wouldn't last very long in the mines. You'd get sick.
Well, the coal mining jobs are an interesting kind of throwback. But anyways, we were talking about Tesla driving cars,
Mhm.
driving Teslas. I mean, again, it's a little bit too early because I mean, natural gas is good, but it's not emissions free. You still commit emissions. But I'm not sure if maybe it's about the same as gasoline at this point. Then
Yeah, well,
once you add all the conversions.
with the COVID-19, everyone is doing their job to prevent global warming by not commuting
Everyone who's
long.
not essential.
Essential. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
all the
right.
essential people keep working, which is like majority of this country, pretty much. I mean, unless you have a desk job. Um, but yeah,
Well, at least you have money to feed your family and to continue paying for your mortgage.
well, not everybody. That's the thing. Yeah, well, yeah, if you're
even
if you're an
if you're
essential,
essential.
yeah, unless you get sick, that's true. Yeah,
Right.
but then there's people who are not that well off, like restaurant workers or restaurant owners who also are kind of fucked right now.
Oh, yeah, indeed.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it on a previous podcast, but
Maybe we'll come back and do our first official episode about something, talking about how the COVID-19 has transformed America.
and how it influenced America and influenced the people in America. Because I think there's a lot of people who are right now in a lot of financial pain, especially now that those now the banks will probably roll over. What are those forbearance periods? So if you have a mortgage, for instance, you don't you could have not paid it for the last couple of months, but now you have to pay it.
Yeah.
And now they're expecting you to pay like the full amount, which is not going to happen. So I'm pretty sure the banks are going to roll that over.
So everyone on YouTube is like, we're going to have millions and millions of homeless people come September.
And that's not going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen.
A lot of foreclosures and a lot of...
I'm wrong now. Because the forbearance applies to the banks, and I'm pretty sure the banks will figure something out, that will work something out. But forbearance is also applies to rent payments, and landlords are probably not going to work something out.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say somebody...
and start eviction
the
processes.
the woman that owns all those apartment buildings.
Ilona?
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Has some...
Well, they don't know what apartment, what state they own.
Right.
She owns the apartment buildings.
She has a few of those, and she's gonna kick them out.
Yeah, good luck to her. I would fight like hell. Given the COVID-19, I would get an attorney, and he'll be like, "I'm not leaving. Fuck you."
Yeah.
The way it should have been done, quite honestly, is well, we talked about it. We can talk about it in the next podcast.
Yeah.
I actually had a solution that actually was shared by some of the other economists out there. I claim to have invented it first, and then not shared with anybody. But in any case, it's kind of screwed up what's happening right now, and we could have done so much better, but we didn't. On the relief front, we could have done so much better on many fronts, but on the economic relief front, we could have done something different and could have spent a lot less money, I think.
Mm-hmm.
A lot less, like at least 80% less, while
Right.
achieving all of the same results
Yeah.
or better results.
Okay.
Anyways,
We're checking out.
all right, that's the end of the podcast, and we will see you sometime this week.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.